Here's a look at the Blue Jays odds compared to the start of the season, powered by FanDuel. The odds are lengthening. They opened the series as the second choice to win the division at plus 220. They're currently plus 950 to win the East. Jays kick off a 3-game series Tuesday at home against the Padres, and TSN radio star Bryan Hayes joins me once again to talk about it. Bryan, first of all, I noticed last time you were on the show, your colleagues on TSN radio, Jamie McLennan and Jeff O'Neill, gave you a bit of a hard time about coming on our show, and I didn't like that one bit. So I just want you to know you're always welcome here, my friend, because we've had them on plenty. We're just trying to spread the wealth, spread the love out a little bit, and I think they're just a little bit jealous. So make sure you hold firm with those two, because they can't bully you around.
No, never. I appreciate that support, though, Jay. I'll make sure they hear about that. They don't like that I don't wear the tie, I think, on there. They're stuffy. They got the tie on when they come on with you. There is a lot of jealousy. I've noticed that. So I'll make sure that they're aware of the support I'm getting from you and the staff. Thank you.
That's important for me. Bryan, the Jays coming off a series sweep of the Arizona Diamondbacks over the weekend. They've won 8 of their last 9. How confident are you that this team, after a somewhat disappointing first half, can make a serious run here in the second half?
I'm getting more and more confident day after day. I mean, health is always precarious in pro sports. It's certainly the case with the Jays right now, coming out of the All-Star break. Gausman a bit banged up, Romano a bit banged up. But I'm not overly scared of the rest of the American League. The terror is within the division, right? You mentioned the odds. You got Tampa, you've got Baltimore. The Yankees and Sox are always lurking. And the Jays have really been putrid within their division. They've been terrible against their 4 counterparts in the American League East. But I think this team is built for a second half. They're a veteran-laden team. I think they're aware of the situation. I think they like the situation they put themselves in as of mid-July. And I think week in, week out, you're going to see an improved baseball team. This is around the time last year they truly took off. And I expect them to replicate that. I think they're likely a wild card team, but I don't think the division is completely out of reach. I mean, the Rays have effectively been a 500 team for about 2 months now. And Baltimore's very good, but they're very young, very inexperienced. You mentioned those odds on FanDuel. That might be worth a sprinkle. I wouldn't be shocked if the Jays took off here.
That's a fair point. Listening to Overdrive on Monday, you made the case that I think a lot of people are making right now. Let's go out and get Shohei Ohtani. If he's available, let's just go out and get him. One of the greatest players who ever played. And former baseball pitcher Dallas Braden came on with you. He said that he'd go as far as to include Alek Manoah in a package. To me, you'd have to include a lot more than that. Then you talk to Steve Phillips, and, because Steve is like the sober dad in the room, and he says that's not how Shapiro and Atkins operate. And he might be right about that, Bryan, but by the end of your show on Monday, had he or anyone else changed your mind about the fact that the Jays should be going after Ohtani?
Jay, Ross Atkins could have been on my show telling me why he will not acquire Shohei Ohtani, and it would not have changed my mind. Nothing was going to change my mind. Now, I think Steve's point is an accurate one. Historically, this Jays front office has not necessarily been an all-in for a rental-type player front office, right? They have spent large to pick up Dalton Varsho, to pick up Jose Barrios. Yeah. They have gone all in on trades, but for guys that they're going to have under team control for years to come. So Shohei Ohtani is a true rental, right? I can't imagine he'd sign in Toronto long term, but it's a possibility. And I can't imagine the ownership would be willing to pony up upwards of $600 million for one player, but it's a possibility. But no, it did not change my mind that I would be all in on Ohtani if I were the Jays for a couple of different reasons. As I mentioned earlier, I think the American League is wide open. Yeah. I do not see a team out there that should strike fear in the Blue Jays right now. So if you bring in Ohtani, who is the epitome of a power bat in Major League Baseball right now, exactly what they've been lacking is power in the lineup. You bring in a guy who obviously is an elite starting pitcher, something this front office has truly valued throughout their time here. They've invested a lot of money and a lot of resources in that rotation. You bring in a guy that checks both those boxes. I think they take off. I think they're good enough to get going anyway. I think they're good enough to be in the playoffs anyway. You add the pinnacle piece at the deadline, that puts you over the top. It immediately makes them an elite baseball team. And there's another element to it that I think is important that doesn't come up enough. And I'm not sure Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro would agree with this because they're thinking about winning year in, year out. But it is the entertainment business. Yep. And Shohei Ohtani would represent the biggest trade in modern Toronto sports history. I would include Kawhi Leonard in that. Kawhi was clearly a massive acquisition by the Raptors, but he wasn't at the level of Shohei Ohtani, right? Like, diehard Jays fans would go crazy. Fairweather Jays fans would go crazy. I think non-baseball fans would go crazy coast to coast. You'd make a fortune. They've invested a lot of money into that stadium. We're coming out of a pandemic, and it's about the story. It's about the ride. It may not have the same outcome that Kawhi did, right? That's the cream of the crop. But I think it would help you move in that direction, and I think it would quickly become the most memorable trade of this century and possibly the most memorable in Blue Jay history. And it would just cause such an incredible stir. I think you could check so many different boxes as to why it makes sense. So I think if Ohtani becomes available, and it sounds as if it's moving in that direction, I believe the Jays should be all in on that.
And, you make such a great point. And I'll make the argument that the Jays are even bigger nationally than the Raptors are. So you're talking about merchandise sales. Like when the Jays were so hot in 15, 16, you'd be out in BC, you'd be in Alberta, everyone's wearing Jays hats. So you're selling 1 million Ohtani jerseys, even if he's just here till the end of the season. Who cares? It's like the Leonard thing. We had him for one season. Guess what we have? A title that we never thought we'd have in this town for the Toronto Raptors. Isn't it worth it then? Even if it is Alec Manoah in the deal, you're selling low on Manoah anyway. Like, doesn't it make sense to throw him in now and just go for it, even if you lose him?
Absolutely. And I think you'd be bracing for losing him, right? But you do get the first foot in the door to at least have the conversation about what it would look like, what it would feel like for him to be a Blue Jay long term. And maybe he immediately shuts it down. Like, that's a possibility. Maybe he immediately says, guys, I'm going to give you the rest of the regular season into the playoffs and I'm out of here, like Kawhi Leonard did. But it's sports is about the story, not to get too hokey and kind of goofy here on you, Jay. Obviously, you want to win. Clearly, that is the priority. But they have put the pieces together of a winning ball club. I think this puts them over the top. But that Kawhi acquisition and the whole season, the whole ride, albeit with Ohtani, it's getting cut in half, right? You're not getting 162 games out of him, but you're probably getting 12 starts. So what David Price represented in 2015 and how many at-bats? A couple hundred at-bats, basically what Troy Tulowitzki represented in 2015 in one player plus because of who he is and how great he is and what he represents. The park is going to be packed anyway if they're in contention. If Ohtani's here, it'll be pouring out into the streets. To your point, from coast to coast, people will be going crazy. I could make compelling cases for the economic side of things, for the baseball side of things in terms of improving the team. There's so many different elements to this that just check so many different boxes. And even if he walks at the end, even if it is a true rental, you had Shohei Ohtani. You had him in a Blue Jay uniform. And that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That's what it is. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get a true unicorn in your city. It's incredibly compelling to me, and I hope Ross Atkins and company are listening and thinking along the same lines.
I hope Shapiro and Atkins are watching this right now, and this completely changed their line of thinking, and now Steve Phillips will come around to our way of thinking. It's all a pipe dream maybe, but this is how Brian and I feel. Jay's back in action Tuesday, home against the Padres. Deadline's just a couple of weeks away. It should be a lot of fun. Brian, so fun to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. Have a great summer, my friend.
You too. Thanks, Jay.